Good morning, church. We are glad to see you, and we're glad for this opportunity that we can all come together and worship our God together. Do you smell that? Imagine you smell chlorine. What does that make you think of? You may remember a hotel pool when you were growing up, or when you took swimming for a PE class when you were in college. When you smell apple pie, you may remember your mom making pies. So many smells bring back memories. I remember growing up, my dad had an early job that he had to get to, and my mom would get up and make his breakfast before she got us up. But I would always smell the coffee and the bacon she made my dad for breakfast. I remember when Mom made roast with potatoes and carrots and onions, that I remember that smell. And when I smell that, I still think of my mother cooking on Sunday morning, or canning tomatoes in the summertime. My dad's garage always smelled of gasoline, oil, and fresh cut wood. My grandmother wore white shoulders, only white shoulders, if you know what that is. And so white shoulders makes me think of my grandmother. But my great-grandmother had this exotic smell that was a mixture of snuff and mothballs. We like smells, and we dislike some smells. We use products like Febreze to make our house smell better or to cover up a bad smell. We use cologne and perfume. We use mouthwash. We use all kinds of products because they have good smells. Well, smells are different. When we study, when we do homework, when we read a book, that part of our brain that reads and understands words is different than the part of the brain that smells something and associates that with a memory. That's the amygdala part of the brain. And that's why a whiff of these smells, like white shoulders, makes me think of my grandmother. Or when I smell Clorox or chlorine, it makes me think of a hotel pool or the swimming class I took when I was a freshman in college. These smells bring back experiences. Now, our Bible reading today tells us a feel-good, smell-good, fragrant story recorded in the Bible. Jesus had a friend named Mary. Mary had a sister named Martha and a brother named Lazarus, and they were friends of Jesus. They may have been relatives. They lived in a little town just outside of Jerusalem called Bethany. And when Jesus would go to Jerusalem, and there's probably times he went to Jerusalem that we don't have recorded in the Bible, he would normally stop at their house when he came, or when he went, or maybe both times. In this story, Jesus is going to Jerusalem late in his ministry. This is the last time he'll go to Jerusalem. And he goes knowing what's going to happen. But he stops at the family home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And they are giving him a dinner because they love him and they're friends. He's stopping there because they're his friends and he loves them. And they're preparing him a special dinner in appreciation for the fact that they raised Mary and Martha's brother Lazarus from the dead. So this is a celebration dinner. So in this dinner, they're eating. It doesn't say they're in separate rooms. It's a family meal. And Mary comes in with a pound of perfume. And she pours it on the feet of Jesus. And we read that she wipes and dries the feet of Jesus with her hair. And the smell of the perfume fills the house. Now, this perfume was valuable. Judas said it was worth 300 denarii. It was worth a year's salary. So this perfume was worth, in our money, between $25,000, $150,000. Mary was probably saving this perfume for her own funeral. A funeral in those days were nothing like today. When somebody died, the family took care of the funeral. They washed the body, they anointed the body with spices and perfumes, and that was a burial in those days. She was probably saving this for her own funeral. This was her funeral insurance. Now think about how expensive this was. It was worth a year's salary. Now think about Chanel No. 5 is pretty expensive. If you bought 1 pound of Chanel No. 5 spray, you would spend about $2,000. It's only a few little ounces in a bottle. If you bought a pound of Chanel No. 5 Grand Extract Baccarat Edition, it would set you back about $22,000. But nothing like what this was worth. She had been saving this. It was the most valuable thing she had. It was an amazing scene. And Jesus said, whenever and wherever the gospel story is told, this thing that Mary did will still be talked about. And it is. Well, here's the setting for the story. This is very late in the ministry of Jesus. This is his last trip to Jerusalem. He had been telling his apostles, his disciples, what was going to happen when he gets there. This is when Jesus is going to be arrested. He's going to be betrayed, arrested, tried, tortured, killed in Jerusalem. It took courage for Jesus and the disciples to come to Jerusalem because he was an outlaw, according to the authorities. So many people came to Jerusalem for the Passover, for any Passover, that Jerusalem couldn't hold them. And this village that Mary, Martha, and Lazarus lived in, Bethany, was an approved city to take some of the overflow from Jerusalem. So there was a lot of people there. Jesus and his disciples were on their way to Jerusalem for the Passover. So he took this opportunity to see his friends, and they had this opportunity to throw this dinner for Jesus. And Mary's heart was overflowing because of her love for Jesus and what he had done for her and her family. So she came with this pound of perfume to anoint Jesus. And think about the smell. The smell was wonderful. Now, as she did this, Judas questioned her actions. He said, what a waste. We could feed a lot of people with this money. We could do a lot to help the poor with this money. And Jesus silenced Judas by saying, this is a kindness done for me, and it's time to do this now because I don't have much time left, and this chance will be gone forever. Now, we have some interesting character sketches in John chapter 12. First of all, Martha, the sister of Mary. And like in the other story we have of Martha and Mary, Martha was busy cooking, serving, cleaning. That's her thing. She's a very practical woman, and she shows her love for Jesus and her family by cooking and serving. That's what she did with the works of her hands. Then we have Mary. Mary is the one that always listened to Jesus. She sat at his feet. She loved to listen to him talk. She learned from Jesus, and she shows her love with this gift. And Mary gives us lessons about love with this gift. First of all, love is extravagant. Mary took the most valuable thing she had, and she spent it all on Jesus. Real love is not love if we're counting the cost. Love gives all, and it regrets that it doesn't have more to give. In The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry, we have a story about two people, Della and Jim, who were poor but very much in love. And it was Christmas time, and they didn't have money for Christmas. Della's most prized possession was her hair, and Jim loved her hair. And the story tells us that when she takes her hair down, her hair was like a robe around her body. And so he decided that to have something to buy her a Christmas present with, he would give his most valuable possession, which was a gold watch his father left him. So he sold his gold watch to buy her some tortoise-shell jeweled combs for her hair. But she wanted to buy Jim something for Christmas. So she sold her hair to buy him a fob for her watch. So they both gave all they had. They gave the most valuable thing they had, not knowing that what they gave was what the other one had already sold. They were very much in love, and this was a picture of their love. That is love. Also in this story, we see humility in Mary's love. It was a sign of honor in those days when you had company. When they came to your door, you either washed their feet or you provided water and a basin to wash their feet because they didn't have concrete sidewalks. They didn't have paved roads. And when they got to somebody's house, their feet were dirty. So you washed your feet when you came to the house, and that was provided. That was hospitality. Also, it was quite an honor to be anointed with oil. And so you're anointed with oil for different reasons. We have stories in the Bible where kings and priests were anointed with oil to consecrate them. Well, on this occasion, we find Mary anointing the feet of Jesus. And perhaps she anointed his feet because she didn't feel worthy to anoint his head. But she still anointed his feet. We also find from this story that love is not self-conscious. Mary wiped the feet of Jesus with her hair. Now, in those days, women did not take their hair down in public. It was a sign of disgrace. You kept your hair up until you went to bed or when you were in private. Mary took her hair down and wiped the feet of Jesus. And Mary never considered that was a breach of etiquette. Mary never considered that. She loved Jesus enough that she didn't consider or worry about what other people thought. And then we always remember love. We read the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. What Mary did, the fragrance filling the house, the memory of the fragrance that stayed in the house and stayed on their clothes and stayed with the believers, and we have that story still today. We remember that Mary loved Jesus, and she gave the best thing that she had. We also have a character sketch of Judas. In chapter 6 of John, we read that Jesus already knew Judas to be a traitor. Maybe Jesus gave Judas the job of being the treasurer for the apostles to give him a sense of honor, to give him something to do. And evidently Judas had a gift for handling money, but he also loved money. And we find that in the book of John, not only in chapter 6, but also here and then later in Matthew, that Judas was so fond of money that he became a thief and a traitor. Then we have a character sketch of the religious leaders of that day. These leaders viewed Jesus and Lazarus, who he had raised from the dead, as a threat. They wanted to keep their collaboration with the Roman authorities alive, to keep their social status and their economic status. And they saw Jesus as a possible threat of leading a rebellion and creating chaos. And the Roman authorities would come down and crack down on everything. And they didn't want that. And they were determined to get rid of Jesus and Lazarus. Usually when we read about Mary, she's at the feet of Jesus. And spending time with Jesus, for us in the Word of God, for Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus, leads to maturity and discernment. Mary did that. And maybe Mary was the only one who best understood who Jesus was, where he came from, what he did, what he was going to do, what he was all about. Now, Judas thinks all of this is a waste of money, but Jesus said, leave her alone. Don't annoy her. She's the only one who understands. Judas sold Jesus out for 30 pieces of silver, but Mary gave so much more than Judas received, and her gift will always be remembered. What is your most valuable possession? What is it that you treasure most? We all have our most valuable possessions. It's probably not a $50,000 bottle of perfume, but we all have something very precious, and it's different for all of us. And God doesn't need our most valuable possession, but we need to be able to give it, to share it, to use it for a greater purpose. Love expressed is not enough. It's not enough to tell a friend, a husband, a wife, a parent, a child that I love you. That's good, but that's not enough. Love needs to be expressed in actions. It's the same thing with God. It's nice for us to come here today to worship, to pray, to sing, to go tell God that we love Him, but love needs to be expressed. Love that's really love is expressed in actions. So our love for God and others needs to be seen and heard. Mary's love was extravagant. She gave the most valuable things she owned. In verse 3 it said the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. And this blessing, this gift she came to Jesus was shared with others. Everyone who saw it, everyone who smelled it. The strong perfume lasted a long time. It lingered in Mary's house. It lingered on the clothes of Jesus. And it was a reminder of Mary's love. As for us, sometimes the chance to show our love may not come again. The chance may be lost, much to our sadness later. So don't let chances of love pass us by. Our love for each other, our love for God.